Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed the lunch. We are going to begin anew with our next panel, Collaboration in the Future of Content Creation and Monetization. And unfortunately, I'm going to need to stand, so I'm apologizing to my panelists here that have to look over at me. But we are full up on this stage with some very esteemed people who I'm very happy to have with me. Now, we're at a very unique moment among TV station groups, one that might fairly be called the age of collaboration. Now, stations have collaborated with each other within groups for a long time, but the volume of these collaborations, the intensity, the complexity of them is something that's new. Collaborations between stations and with their Washington, D.C. bureaus, national content hubs, and upstart national news efforts, they're all happening with a scale and a frequency that the industry has not seen before. So today we're going to look at those collaborations through the lens of creating efficiencies and maximizing the ROI of content creation across a group. It's my pleasure to introduce our speakers. John Kelly is the Director of Data Journalism at ABC-owned television stations. Scott Livingston is the SVP of News at Sinclair, who have finally coaxed onto a panel after a long time. Dean Littleton is the SVP of Local Media at the EW Scripps Company. Jeff Zelmer is very gamely pinch hitting today for Emily Stone, who was ill, and Jeff is at Fox Television Stations, where he is the SVP of Digital. Ray Thompson is the Senior Director of Partners and Alliances at Avid. And Jerry Walsh, and Jerry, I'm sorry I didn't see you before just now from the stage. Jerry Walsh is the SVP of Local Content Development at Nexstar Media Group. Welcome to you all. Now, everyone's coming to this from very different vantage points, very interesting. We're going to talk about this from wholly different points of view. And I want to start with Dean, because Dean, you've undergone some very dramatic changes that have been happening organizationally at Scripps, largely around creating a more muscular and productive news apparatus. Everyone wants their news apparatus described thusly. This began with a mandate from your CEO, Adam Simpson, to revolutionize news production at the company, generating more and better content in your markets and in the web of collaborations between, and this is a lot to keep track of, you have your stations, the national outlets, Scripps News, the DC Bureau, the Denver Content Hub, and even Court TV. So to start with, can you explain the underlying reasoning and how you have been executing this overhaul?
Sure. Michael, thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to be here, and it's an honor to be on this distinguished panel, so I appreciate the opportunity. Some people on this panel have been in this space a little longer than Scripps, so this is new for us to have a national and international news organization now that's integrated into what we do, and then you layer that in with the bureaus that already existed and then all of our local TV newsrooms. It just makes sense, from a logistics and content perspective to figure out a better way to collaborate and improve our content. I think you mentioned it, Michael. We're in the middle of a massive overhaul with how we produce news as a company. And one of the end results of that is to put a significantly larger number of journalists on the street than what we have right now. And I'll give you a good example in a market where we are right in the middle of the transition is Lafayette, Louisiana, where we will go from 4 reporters, dedicated reporters, to more than a dozen. And so in a case like that, now if you multiply that out across all of our marketplaces, that is a lot of content. That's a lot of original reporting that you've now got to figure out. How do you surface that? How do you propagate that around the company? And so, we've come up with there's a couple solutions. One is technical and one is people. There's a tool that we developed, with a partner that allows us now to be able to see, if your newsroom is in Lafayette, Louisiana, they can see what is being produced at all the other stations and Scripps News and vice versa. So everybody can see what each other is doing, and they're able to drag content into rundowns or onto their website. The other part of that is people. There is a news leader from local that now participates every day in the Scripps News editorial meetings. And so that's then helping us with collaboration. And so a great example of that would be the Title 42 coverage this summer, where the we would have, I think, in a prior state, the stations that are along the border would have sent a crew and they would have covered it, and Scripps News would have covered it. And then if it made sense, you might grab somebody else's coverage and drag it into your newscast. But now we're collaborating ahead of that and planning so that if there are 6 reporters involved, each reporter has a different angle. And so as a viewer at home, your experience is much more rich and robust than it would have been before, because now we're all aligned, and the experience for the viewer is such that I'm coming away, I feel like at the end of that newscast or when I log off of the website, much more informed than where it would have been beforehand. And then the other thing I would point out, I think, is getting to a place where, and we're just now starting to get into this, where it's different when your national or international news organization that is under your umbrella is using the same content strategy as your stations. So that, for instance, I'll use Denver as the station where I'm based out of Denver, and it's an ABC station. We love our partnership with ABC, but our content strategy might be a little different than what the network's content strategy is. And so that story you might grab from the network may feel sort of parachuted into your newscast, as opposed to a collaborative approach where everybody's story is planned, and so that it's a much more congruent viewing experience for the consumer, because you're all sort of approaching it with the same content strategy.
In terms of the visibility, you mentioned just a few minutes ago that the news leader from local, who I guess represents what the local content is. So who is that? Is that the news director? Who kind of says, here's what we've got, and kind of walks maybe the national team through the nuances?
So, Sean McLaughlin, who's leads news for local, one person from his team, her name's Cameron Beck, and so she attends every Scripps News editorial meeting, and then it's her responsibility on a day in, day out basis to interface with the TV stations on daily coverage, but then also to sort of lift her head up and look down the road and look for opportunities to collaborate. So think about UAW strike coverage with our stations in Detroit and Cleveland and Scripps News. I mean, there's opportunities there to look forward, and that's what our role is.
And people will be wondering, how do you go from 4 to 12 and pay for that, reporter-wise?
It's a simple reallocation of resources. There's less emphasis on the performative aspect of newscasts, where you're doing typically, where we've all been in this space, we've been in this business for a long time, the live shot for the sake of being live, those sorts of things. Maybe we de-emphasize that and focus on the journalism. Okay. And that's where.
And the anchors too, right?
And the anchors, right.
Jeff, live now at Fox, it's streaming news service. If you haven't seen it, it's comprised of content from across the Fox owned stations. How have you created a structure there to make each station's content more visible, clearly and efficiently visible to the people on the desk?
Yeah, as a streaming, we're 100% focused on streaming, right? And that might not always match the priorities of the station. So you're right. Like, the stations have their goals and we have our goals, but we need their help in this space. So we took it almost how we approach the users that we would have that are watching Live Now. We are always about ease and simplicity, make it as easy as possible. We took that same approach with Live Now. We went to the stations. We just figured out, what are they using? It's not rocket science. It's okay. Slack, email, the shared docs. We just need to organize the communication. The same tools, just do it in a more organized fashion, get everybody in the same place. And then it's all about, how do we make sure they care? And so we went to each station and we found what we call our Live Now champions there. And there's one person in each station that communicates with our EPs at the Live Now side, and our EPs go to them as well. So if we need something, we have a single point of communication. And when they want to advocate for us in the newsroom, they're like, remember, there's this national team that you can get your content out there streaming everywhere right now. They do that, excuse me, to the reporters, to the news directors every day, and then they tell us when there's things that are happening. So it's not as much the tech that's behind it. We tap into the same live use systems. We can grab the content. We can grab the streams when we need to. It's knowing that it's there and having that voice there has really helped us.
So that person is really important, that individual.
Absolutely.
What position do they tend to occupy in the newsroom?
It's interesting. Emily could tell you, this is where I'm
just the broad stroke.
But I can tell you it's not the same. It depends on each station. In some stations, we have an assignment desk person that might be really eager to do this. Others, it might be an EP that is just all about streaming as well. Other places, it may be something we don't expect. It's just somebody in the newsroom that can be that voice in the meetings, that's there.
And they have to have kind of a discerning eye. This is why this is going to be play for national.
Yeah, and we also give a lot of feedback back to them, right? Like, so, okay, this live feed that you guys gave us, it didn't really work, and we weren't able to do much with it. And they learn over time as we communicate back, and just keeping those lines, that communication going is really what's helping us a lot.
You've been doing this a couple of years, at least 2 years now, more?
More than that, yes.
So what, now that you've had some, road behind you, what have been some of the knock-on effects for the stations themselves? Now, obviously the service.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I'll give one specific example. To do this right, we had to know not just what's happening right now, but all the planning that was coming in. What's planned for the next week, next month, et cetera. And there was no universal editorial calendar that everybody was using. Every station had one, but Live Now needed its one. And so as we set up these structures, we started building this unintentionally for what we needed. And the stations were communicating with us every week unintentionally just for what we needed. And now the stations don't have to, when something happens, they're not going, 20 stations going, asking Chicago for something, 5 stations asking whoever. They now have a universal place in the center that we created of here's your planning for the week. Here's your planning for everything. And they use that constantly. It's become one of the most important docs from what I hear, for a lot of the planning from other stations across the group.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, Scott, the National Desk, if you don't know it, is Sinclair's national news product. It airs in about 70 of the stations. And I think, is it 2 and 4 hour versions or longer?
We do 5 hours in the morning, 2 hours in late news.
Okay. And so this is entirely comprised of content from Sinclair stations?
For the most part, it's built from the ground up, yes.
So how did you set up an infrastructure at Sinclair to enable the sharing there?
Yeah, well, we worked with, first I should point out that, collaboration and content sharing has always been part of our DNA. We're a big believer if we're going to eliminate the sea of sameness, that repetition that you see in local news, that you need to leverage all your assets. And we have more than 70 news producing stations across Sinclair. So we had always had systems in place to share content. Where every time I was in a newsroom or a content center, I would ask the question of how many reporters do we have working for us today? And you may have a market with, say, 5. I'm like, well, we're in Ohio. We actually have 40 reporters working for us today. And we want to make sure that we use our assets, that we can provide a unique experience. And I think that's, at the end of the day, collaboration helps us create more value to the viewer. If you provide more value, that leads to engagement, and engagement leads to action. So a big advantage for us to be able to leverage our assets and be able to collaborate. With the National Desk, we wanted to launch something, a national product years ago, but quite frankly, we didn't think technology was where it needed to be to fully take advantage of all of our assets across Sinclair. Now with the National Desk, we are using Avid, and Ray's here from Avid. So we work with Avid to create a content bank. So all of our assets are in one spot. So if I'm in Seattle, Washington, or Baltimore, or at the National Desk in DC, I can take a look at all my content that exists across Sinclair. We've also created a plugin with Maztec, so we flip all our video files through Maztec. That also allows us to archive all that material, so we can go back and say, 2 weeks ago this occurred. We can pull assets from 2 or 3 weeks ago. And then we created a Sinclair Wire. So within Avid, within Maztec, we can notify, or stations can notify us of breaking news. And we do a great job with breaking news. I'm proud to say, I think as a local broadcaster, we do the best job of covering breaking news because we've had a system like this in place where we can take advantage of content as it bubbles up. And part of the National Desk, they call it a national newscast. And yes, it reaches, about 25% of the country. But it's really about identifying content and coverage that's bubbling up in local communities across the country. And then what we do at the National Desk is we add additional context, some additional clarity to those important stories that are bubbling up.
And do you do that? Do you interview the reporters who maybe put the package together then to do that?
Absolutely. And one of the things that we also try to point out in our broadcast is, and of course we're producing content for all platforms. So for the content cast, if you will, we will point out the fact that we're going to a reporter in Seattle that's been in Seattle for 20 years. And so why that's so important is we want the viewer to understand that we do have a network of 3,500 journalists across the country that are working on covering these important stories. So if we can provide a little bit of their bio then the Bureau understands, wait a minute, maybe they're going to go more than a centimeter deep. No offense to network reporters. The networks do a great job, but admittedly, they do parachute people in for 48 hours. I can turn to 3,500 news employees and say, you've been covering Seattle for 20 years. And they can provide perspective, context, and clarity to important stories that you probably can't get anywhere else. So that's our big advantage.
I'll ask you what I asked Jeff about the knock-on effects too, because I don't want to conflate entirely the word collaboration and sharing, because there's a Venn diagram of overlap, but it's not complete. So have there been knock-on effects of collaborating now between stations that didn't exist before the national desk was facilitating this elaborate sharing mechanism?
Absolutely. I think now they can see the value of the fact that they have to collaborate. I also think that, it's funny, Jerry and I were having a conversation at lunch before this session, and we were talking about now we're finally seeing in content centers in our newsrooms where people realize the advantage of being part of a big organization. Right. And they realize that, hey, if I take advantage of all these assets that we have, then I can be relevant. And that's our biggest challenge. Mm-hmm. Admittedly, our biggest challenge is staying relevant. And you can do that because of understanding you have the right systems in place. You can leverage those boots on the ground, if you will, across the country to provide, again, a unique viewing experience.
All right. So, Jerry, let's come to you. Now, Nexstar's local stations and the DC Bureau roll up through you. And you've also got daily collaborations in place with The Hill now, which Nexstar owns. So tell me about what value that The Hill brings to the local stations and vice versa.
Well, and also on the collaboration, there is daily collaboration with News Nation.
And News Nation.
And I know we're not going to divulge too much into that, but so the question was what the value the Hill has brought. The Hill has brought some opportunities for the stations to tap into those embedded resources in Washington, D.C., the people that are talking to the lawmakers, that are doing those long form opportunities that can be part of maybe our locally produced weekly political shows, which we do several of those around the country, or be part of our digital properties with whether it be digital first videos or articles that we can collaborate on with the Hill. But also gives us opportunities to get into polling. Last year we did some 45 polls where we collaborated with the Hill and our local stations, not only to get where the candidates stand horse race data, but issue specific data as well in those races. What are those important milestones that are going to maybe turn those races or those issues that the voters are going to be deciding on when they go to the polls?
Mm-hmm. And now you have something like the speakership, and that miasma going on right now. Have you seen like knock-on effects there that have already been insight you get from local stations, the constituencies where the various candidates are coming from?
Well, again, I think that comes back to, and this goes back to what Scott was saying, this collaboration we've been doing for a while, long before the Hill from that perspective. When we acquired the Media General television stations, we inherited a bureau in Washington, D.C. They had a small bureau there, and Nexstar immediately doubled the size of that bureau because, back to the point, we need more boots on the ground in Washington to get the coverage for the local stations. And we charged that bureau with, let's go find local lawmakers. We're going to hear from the folks in the majority conference and the whips and all that from the pool services. We need to go find the Peoria congressperson for the station in Peoria. We need to find the local lawmakers for WPIX in New York, so that they can have those unique opportunities in their news coverage. And so that's what that bureau does, which today is bordering on 20 people, that are just servicing the local stations, not the Hill, not News Nation, but just servicing the local stations, trying to get that content out of there. And again, Michael, from a standpoint of, we bring in some 45 feeds into our Washington bureau from, everything from the U.S. pools to other feeds in and around Washington, D.C. that spun back out to the television stations. Hey, you might be interested on this hearing on water in California that the California stations might want. And additionally, it goes out for broadcast consumption, but, we're now set up so that those hearings could be streamed live on all of our platforms if the digital producers wanted to actually see that as well. So there's been a lot of that collaboration to think about, how do I cover it once, make it available for everybody, but also give them the opportunity to, when it gets back to the station, I can localize it, because that's the most important thing. The things that sets us all apart is the way we provide that context of why that story is important on the local level.
So how did you put the communicative channels in place to enable that? And then you add in News Nation to that as well. And I imagine they're all sharing the same channels.
So I think first off, you got to hire really smart people that have done this stuff before. The other thing is you got to ask the people that you're servicing, and what we realize off the bat is who's our customer for the DC Bureau. It's the news directors. It's the producers at the station levels. It's not the end viewer. That bureau doesn't go directly to an end viewer. They got to go to a TV station first or a digital content center first. So we asked them, how do you want to be communicated to, and what's that process look like? And so we've got, similar to what everyone else here, we've got a daybook system where we'll plan out our day. These are the milestones that we're going to cover throughout the day. On certain days like today, when we're talking about speakers, we might set up a camera in a specific location in the Capitol and say, Nexstar is going to have a camera position there. Send your member of the House to that camera position. Nights like State of the Union, we have to have two positions, and there's a line of where members of the House wait for 30 minutes. It's the only time people will wait. Politicians will wait for us in Washington, D.C. because they know they're going to get on their local TV if they wait in line and they get that interview in there. So we put that stuff in place. And again, that daybook, DC plans out their day, but every television station in the network, the 111 newsrooms that we operate today, all have a daybook, all can see each other's daybooks, and they can tap into that content. And then above that, we have what we call the aggregated content team, which would be beyond DC. It'd be any type of news event, hurricanes or coverage that's happening around the country. They have their own daybook, and they're out there curating the content that's not just DC focused, but it's of a national nature that the stations may want to use in their local newscasts.
So you have one or two air traffic controllers now moving from that industry over to yours to kind of help in some of this.
Yeah.
John, if you don't know, runs the data reporting operation inside of ABC's station. And if you don't know his work, you should be familiar with it because it's really fascinating stuff he's been doing. And these collaborations, this data reporting has set up these remarkable cross-group collaborations. I think the best way to maybe talk about this is for John to explain, maybe by one or two specific examples, the kind of project and how that scales and then connects the stations.
Sure. Thanks. Thanks, Michael. I talk a lot about how data analysis by our team can supercharge collaborative journalism, and particularly some of the journalism of the highest consequence, the high impact investigations and enterprise kinds of stories. And so the system that we have set up is to have that initial work done one time, but then be applicable for unique stories in every one of the markets where we have a station, as well as at the network. And so, when you think about a federal government database of something like inspections, there's data about that at the national level, but that data is about things that are in each community. And so if we're finding a flaw in something, it's easy to identify problems that need to be addressed in each one of our markets, but also problem that nationally may be of importance to ABC News as a network, or if we work in partnership with ESPN. A recent example, we went and we gathered city by city data about the kinds of incidents that lead police to stop people and search them. So we did that for dozens of large cities across the country, including all of the markets where we have a local station. And we analyzed that data, and we found some pretty significant disparities in terms of race and ethnicity about who was being pulled over and who was being searched. And those disparities are a big story in the city. When we find that disparity in Chicago, that's a big story in Chicago. We find it in LA, that's a big story in LA. When we find it in 30 out of 30 cities, that's also a big story nationally. And so we have this high impact work, and the collaboration part, it's really, we're communicating those data findings. We're doing that heavy lifting. Rather than each of those stations having to have a full data team, they all have access to a full data journalism team. We're making those findings, we're communicating them to the reporters and the news teams at each station, and then we're actually fully collaborating. those local reporters, those investigative reporters and producers in our local newsrooms are working side by side with network investigative reporters. And so in that particular case, we worked with Chief Justice Correspondent Pierre Thomas, and you're able to do things like have the local reporters go talk to the local police chief and the local police officers, as well as local people who have compelling stories to tell about how those stops and sometimes inappropriate searches impacted their lives, and bring that material together. All of those interviews share, while Pierre is talking to national experts at the Department of Justice or in academia, or using all of his sourcing across the country over years of covering these kinds of issues. And you're bringing all that together. At the national level, Pierre then, for Nightline, has a piece that has access to the best of the compelling interviews done at the local level. The local reporters got part of their story on in the national piece, and we make sure that that's done with full credit to those reporters for their work they're doing, and at the local level, they're getting access to the interviews that Pierre has done nationally, as well as Pierre's expertise on that topic. And we've applied that same system. I've been doing that for a decade across print, at first with USA Today, and now with ABC in broadcast and digital. And that applying that system to go after stories like, abuse of teachers who cross state lines, and mothers who die in childbirth, and, all sorts of issues, access to COVID testing, and inaccess. And that system, is something that we think is a true collaboration. We think can be applied, it's repeatable, and it can be done anywhere.
Does the conception of these projects always or often originate with your team, or do they talk with you? Do they float up ideas in your direction?
No, our team sits centrally, but the members of it are based in our local newsrooms. I think that the worst ideas typically come from headquarters and corporate, and the best ideas start with a local beat reporter in a city saying, "Hey, I saw this. What do you think of this?" And us spending some time then thinking about, okay, how might we do that? For instance, we have 3 stations in California. How might we do that as a California story? How might we approach that nationally? Or if it's just a great story in and of itself in just Fresno, then we'll do that there and help them with that. But yeah, they bubble up in both they bubble up and spread in all sorts of directions.
And you mentioned the collaboration with ABC News National, but also this has facilitated collaborations with ESPN and I think Nat Geo. So how does it come to be that encompassing?
Yeah, we have a really unique set of distribution channels, and we would be foolish to not take advantage of those. We will. Another example of a project we recently did is, we looked at forever chemicals and contamination in drinking water, and our data team did the analysis of that and provided our stations with the information about what the sources of contamination were in the local markets for local stories. But we also worked with ABC News and Nat Geo and our documentary film producers and our premium content team, who are spectacular, to develop a documentary series that's come out in 3 parts over the course of the fall, that is able also to air on Hulu. And so we just have those opportunities to get that information in front of a lot of people and take that collaboration and expand it. I mean, as an investigative journalist, when I think about us investing time, there's a business case for what we do, which is to centralize that very difficult and time-consuming discipline of the data analysis, and that makes good business sense from an investigative journalist standpoint. When we invest in this kind of reporting, one of my goals is for as many people as possible to know the thing that we revealed. And so taking advantage of all of the different places that we can do that, getting it on every one of our local stations air, and trying to get it, onto platforms like Hulu or Nat Geo, or work with ESPN on investigative stories as we've done. I just think that multiplies the people that see it and the impact that we can have.
Yeah, I think that one takeaway from this whole discussion is there's a win-win-win kind of calculus that's happening here. Now, Ray, in order to pull off these kinds of collaborations at scale, you need the tools to do that. And we've already talked a little bit about how Sinclair is using Avid. So you have a tool called Collaborate that is inside of Media Central. How does that work?
Sure. So first of all, thank you for allowing Avid to be on this very distinguished panel. It's great to be on this panel with all of you. And really in response to everything you guys were all describing in terms of the demand to drive higher efficiencies with often, local and national news outlets with a workforce that's oftentimes distributed or hybrid. Avid has really been emphasizing delivering tools that allow you to do just that, which is basically craft stories that are both for linear and digital distribution and do it in a way that everybody has access to what they need when they need it, right? And it's a constant battle, of course, and it's something that we constantly work on. But if you look at recent products that we've come out with, Nexus Edge, which allows editors to basically edit as if they're sitting in the building, but do so from anywhere. Edit on Demand, which is our SaaS offering that allows you to basically spin up an editorial environment and expand as the project demands. And then when you're done with it, spin it back down for added capacity. You look at Stream.io, which we had just announced at IBC, which is really a combination of what used to be known as Airspeed and or FastServe with what was Media Central Stream into one platform that's a virtualized platform, runs on common off-the-shelf hardware that basically allows you to ingest both IP and SDI feeds. Those are all Avid developed tool sets. And then you look at what we're doing with third parties, right? I own the API strategy right now for Avid as part of my role. And we're really getting more aggressive in trying to enable third-party tool sets to basically get to market faster, to, again, accelerate the delivery of solutions that will basically allow news organizations to do just what they're trying to do, which is, better stories delivered faster across more outlets. So Collaborate is one of those tool sets that we're really has grown out of this need, right? This demand, which is a way to sort of craft a story, create it in a way that you can assign resources. Those resources are obviously people, but they're also trucks and cameras and everything else. It also allows you to aggregate all the content that goes along with that story and then track it as that story basically gets evolves, right, in terms of how it gets delivered. So anyone who's now tasked with delivering a story, right, and is assigned a piece of that story development gets basically notified throughout the course of the development of that story. And that basically allows everyone to basically be much more efficient because now I know that this part and this part have been done. I know this media is available for this particular story, and that media could come from a Media Central library. It could come from a third-party, a set of storage where that content might be living. It could come from social media. It could come from, user-generated content that's been sent to the station. It could come over IP feeds, live feeds. It could be a mix of all of it, right? All of which is tagged with metadata and so on, so that you can then further evolve that story and do so in a much more, eloquent fashion, right? And it's something that we just released, I'd say, within the last year or so, and the response has been very positive, right? I kind of joke that it's like Slack for news. It's a way to organize all those resources to then hopefully help these guys achieve what it is they need to, right? Which is, that sort of local take on a national news story, but at the same time be able to deliver the national story and do so in a timely fashion.
Can you elaborate on how the remote access facet further facilitates the complexity of these collaborations?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the fact that, so Collaborate runs, of course, on a mobile app, right? You can do it on any iOS platform. You can do it from a web browser, which basically allows you to basically run it on anything. But the sort of everything we've seen, right, just in terms of how consumers are basically, relying on mobile devices and social to get a lot of their content, it's really changed everything, right, of course, over the last several years. And all of that is just accelerated. And so emphasizing the ability to allow the workforce to then respond quickly and be able to contribute from pretty much anywhere, anytime, off of any device with metadata, right, and make it as meaningful as possible. And we haven't talked about AI or anything yet, but I know that that's a big part of this, right, as well. And do so in a way that supports this sort of hybrid and distributed workforce in scenarios where you have call letter stations and national stations all trying to better collaborate, aggregate, and manage all these incoming feeds, and then, again, access that content from anywhere. That's really what we've been emphasizing, and that's a big challenge, right? And it's one that we're constantly working on, right, with input from everybody here.
Yeah,
right?
I was going to say the input. I mean, you're probably getting a lot of feedback now, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Everything everybody's saying here is like perfect. I'm glad this is recorded, so we can just give this to the product guys. But basically, this is exactly what we listen to, right? Yeah. And a lot of these folks participate in Avid's customer association, right, which is the direct feedback from the customer to Avid, right? Run by Avid customers, right? So that we can have just this, right? This type of dialogue.
And that metadata. You got to have that metadata.
Metadata is
copious.
everything.
Okay. So brought everybody in here. We laid out the frameworks, for each of your respective collaborative efforts here. So now I want to focus on the upshots, the efficiencies, and the opportunities that they've enabled. And so anybody can jump in on any of my subsequent questions here. So first of all, how have these cross-group collaborations had an impact on your local newsrooms in terms of perhaps refocusing the nature of story assignments, and the ways in which then reporters are reframing their stories, because they're not just talking to their local market per se, but that package or some iteration of it now may end up in a national context, and so they're addressing different people, and there are mechanics around that. So how is that having an impact on the local newsrooms and the way that they work? And I'm sure you're not shy, so.
I mean, I'll just start and say, I think it depends on the story, obviously. The greatest thing about this is every story starts off as local, and then where does it actually go from there? And I know John kind of hit on that, and I agree that 100%. If we want to take something bigger than local, we'll probably bring in somebody to help take it to where it can play local. I'd rather the news directors, the producers, the reporters focus on how do I win in that market first, and that storytelling's got to be done a specific way. And then if it needs to go beyond that, and we're talking a lot about national, a lot of our interest ends up being regional. Here in New York State, Nexstar has a television station in every single broadcast market in New York State. That's 10 broadcast markets. So, there could be some state-specific stories that could play across the state. But if it's being reported in Albany, it's going to be reported a specific way because it's got to be there. So I think that it gives us the opportunity to report it first locally, but then the stations and the regions and then the national editors that we have need to go back in and say, what tweaks do I need to make to maybe write the story to be applicable to a bigger audience?
Yeah, I would agree with that. That's very similar to our strategy. We take a lot of local content, and then our producers and reporters at the national desk will add that additional context that make it more relevant to a national audience. We'll also reach out to one or two reporters per day and ask them, hey, your story is interesting. We're curious to learn a little bit more. And then can you contribute a story for the national desk? So there's a one-on-one conversation with that reporter where if they're in Baltimore or Seattle or one of our local markets.
They're probably pretty excited to get that call.
They are excited to get the call, right? They want to be part of something bigger. They understand it's a priority for the company. They watch the show. They're really proud of what we've been able to produce. So it is a point of pride. It's also great that someone from, maybe a lot of times I'll make the call, I'll find time to make the call, or I'll make the call afterwards. And I think typically it's knowing that someone's watching, that you made an extra effort and you appreciate that. And then they can see the value of collaboration. They can see the value of being part of Sinclair. We really push our news directors to point that out. Like I'll send some talking points at the end of the week, some weekly wins, and taking those weekly wins and integrating it into their weekly wins and their weekly email, so they can see that they're part of something that's bigger, and how their content and their presence can be shared across a national audience. I think the key here is that, technology has changed, which is great, right? We were pushing, I was in meetings with Avid, where we were really pushing them to step up their game, so that we can do some of these cool things. Now, the emphasis is on us changing our workflows so that because from the earlier session with my boss, Chris Ripley, they were talking about efficiencies and the fact that we have all these platforms. And the economic reality is that we're not really going to be adding 4 or 5 positions per content center or newsroom. So if we change our workflows and adjust our workflows to buy back time, then we can produce distinctive content for the region or for the national product. And we also can produce more distinctive content for the other platforms.
I want to paint a little bit more vivid a picture of those workflows in a second, but I want to come back to the part of my question about the inception of the story assignment, the nature of the story assignments themselves, because I'm wondering, especially with investigative or enterprise reporting, where it's much more labor intensive. You've got to it's not a quick hit kind of story. Are you thinking now about, will this play across the state of California or New York, or does it have national resonance? Are you thinking more so, by those criteria?
We do. We have producers that vet the content, that review it beforehand. We're in any investigative story, we have a weekly call. So those stories are in our pipeline. We're having conversations to see if it's relevant, how it can play in multiple regions across the country. We also set up a research team. So our biggest issue at the local level is they didn't have time to go deeper. They couldn't go more than a centimeter deep because they didn't have those resources. So we have several researchers at corporate, and so they funnel their stories. We have a conversation. They'll do the deep dive. They'll find the data, and then they share them with the data. And based on the data, then they can turn a more impactful story. So that process may take several weeks if it was just left at the local level, but because we have the resources at corporate, we can turn those stories in 2 or 3 days, or we can start the process and accelerate our storytelling.
Mm-hmm. And John, you want to jump into that for how now the existence of your position and your team changes maybe the nature of stories, so that process, the assignment process a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that came to mind as we were talking about that is it expands the number of people in a newsroom in a local newsroom who may be able to tackle more complicated stories. If some of that, the harder elements of the research that take a little bit more technical expertise or expertise with open records laws and that kind of reporting, if some of that is being done, and if you have partners across the country helping you as a group, it can open the door to maybe different reporters in your newsroom being able to partner and work on those stories and gain that learning opportunity and increase their skills and their confidence. And so there's a kind of professional development, I think, opportunity in there, and an additional mentoring. I'm a big believer in that reporters should be working with lots of different editors and executive producers and news leaders so they can learn a lot of different things, and that cross-pollination helps build better journalists at the local level.
Let me ask an obligatory but impromptu AI-related question then to that. Are you yet able to use AI to assist on some of that gathering of data in a substantive way?
I don't know if I'd say not AI so much. I mean, we certainly use computing to automate, certain elements of data analysis and things like that, but there's a human in the process the whole way. So, I mean, it's not AI in that sense. It's, computer code, but no, not yet. I think there's potential down the road for those kind of things, as that technology becomes more mature and less, unreliable.
Mm-hmm. So back to the workflows. You say they're more productive. Are they more productive? They're more muscular, I guess, and they're more efficient. Are you getting more content now because of these collaborations, just in volume?
We are. I mean, we absolutely are. We're 2 years ago when we were starting, we were trying to find everything. We were putting on any press conference that was out there just to fill the time, because we are all live all the time. Now it's like, we can make decisions. And that's just exciting to see that piece of it. It was interesting earlier. One of the other questions was about, you were talking about bringing the local up to the national side and tweaking it from there. We've actually seen a lot of value just letting local be local at a national scale. Because there's so much trust in the local stations that maybe, like, for instance, in Hurricane Ian, when it's coming through Tampa and then Orlando, we had all these eyes on it. Maybe we don't need to insert ourselves into that. Maybe we just need to give a scale and a voice to that local that knows every single neighborhood there and bring it up. And that actually worked better for us.
Well, sometimes it's self-evident,
exactly.
too, just like its relevance doesn't need to be obviated. We had a car crash in Louisiana and New Orleans, where I am, a couple of days ago. There's a 110-car pileup because of this smoke from swamp fires. Half a dozen people died. I mean, that's, you just need the local reporter there to bring the story. Okay, so let's talk about breaking news. Speaking of that, that has its own particular commodity value, and I imagine there might be some different procedures in place in terms of sharing and collaborating around a breaking story. We've been talking about things that are planned and things where there's a lot of research being done, but what about the breaking events?
I'll jump in again because we are
very breaking.
Entirely breaking. That's all we do is breaking news. I can't tell you that we have different procedures because that's all we do. So it is our procedures, but the scale of, like, take right now, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict that's occurring and how important that is. so many eyes. I'm sure it's the same across all of you. I mean, we're up 133% of viewers right now. People care about this story. So we better make sure that we are pulling all of the information in. And most of that is international content coming over. But then Chicago has a news conference where there's a hostage that was released, and we have to get that as fast as possible. If we aren't at our best with these procedures, we don't know about it, we don't get it on when it needs to be, and we don't get to meet the needs of all of those viewers that are currently coming to us right now during this important story.
Yeah, and breaking news is our number one priority on all platforms. And so our new workflows allow us to identify those stories that are bubbling up. We believe, because we have boots on the ground and we have a system in place, the Sinclair Wire, that the local newsrooms know that they have to notify us of anything that is potentially a significant breaking news story, so that we can jump on the social and digital platforms, and then we can make a decision on, will they provide content for the group, or will we move an additional resource to that market to provide extensive coverage for the group.
And Dean, I'm curious, Scripps has so many multi-directional things going on. How has this reorg that you've done so far, to the extent that you're in it, how has that impacted how breaking unfolds, how you assimilate that?
Yeah, I think about planning for the unplanned, right? And so a good example of that would be Hurricane Idalia that came ashore near Tallahassee. That station, incidentally, had just gone through this transition to this new, more robust reporting structure. And so we now have, in that market, triple the number of reporters that we had before. But we also have jump teams from all of the Scripps stations that are prepared to hop on a plane and within a few hours
back
be
them
there
up and
to do that. We can direct from remote stations in order to spell their directors in Tallahassee. So there's a system that we have in place that doesn't really matter the location or the breaking news event, that you just pull the trigger and you're able to execute on that, depending, it doesn't matter where it is or what the situation is.
And I meant to ask you this before, but aren't there regional managing editors that you work with to kind of like would position those jump teams and say, okay, this is surfacing and we need
Correct.
to go.
And that's how you can move much more quickly. And they're all identified in advance. So it's not like you're having to poll and ask who would be interested. They've all demonstrated interest in that and are ready to go.
Nothing ad hoc.
No.
Okay. Ad hoc is done. That area is over. By the way, I want to open this up and have questions. We have some time, so I want to make sure to get to your questions. If you have any, just come up to, we don't need to wait till the last minute, so just come up to the mic and I'll see you and get you in there. I wonder, so how have these collaborative structures, have you gotten more ROI out of breaking news now than you did maybe a year or two ago? Do you find, I think with Fox almost certainly, right? I mean,
Yes. Easy. Yes.
Yeah. I mean,
That's right. That's in our entire business on that.
was that basically true for everybody that?
Yeah. Look, I think that the breaking news and the communication that we have in place and the ability to have those journalists, that you talk about the hurricanes. I mean, that's where we all need to shine, because you're all at that local level for sure. Absolutely. There's great value in that.
So we've been talking so positively. I want to talk negatively now, in terms of missteps, because surely you have all made horrific mistakes. You must have done, because this is so hard to do. So I wonder, and Ray, if you want to also talk to this on the tech side and just, where the tech has failed perhaps, and you found those
no left,
as they say, pain points. What have been some of your more awful, painful failures in the course of trying to figure this all out? Yeah. I should put everybody on the spot for this one so we can all be.
For us, I think it was training. We started with the Newsroom of the Future right before COVID hit. We had 5 proof of concept markets. We did a lot of surveys. We wanted to change our workflows so that we can be more relevant and that we can take advantage of our size and scale. But we had to adjust our workflows. And so it was a pretty intense movement, if you will, to get 75 newsrooms to change how they do things so that we can buy back time, so that we can produce more relevant content, so we can produce more content. So it's a quality play, a quantity play and a quality play, so we can go more than a centimeter deep and provide more of the so what that consumers really want, news consumers want. So for us, I think it was identifying, I think we were really smart out of the gate to take 5 markets and work closely with those 5 markets to get their input. The plan was based on their reaction, us testing new concepts. So that was smart. Explaining it, I think we did a good job explaining the why. I think people have a good grasp of why we need to do this. But the breakdown, I think, was training. What we realized is that you need to make sure that the workforce is really comfortable, not just with the concept, but we assume some things that people would understand how to use Avid more effectively, or how to use a Mastech. So for us, it was going back, and we actually added a couple positions to help us train the workforce. So we will go into market. We're typically, I will make about 15 visits so far this year, 15 visits solely focusing on the newsroom of the future, and spending 2 or 3 days in a content center and realizing where the gaps are, then going back to our training team and saying, okay, we have an issue here in this particular market. And they'll go in, flood the market with additional training so we can bring their skills up to where they need to be, so we can take advantage of our size and scale and produce more distinctive content on every platform. So I'd say training.
Okay. Scott was brave. He went first, but I'm not letting anybody else off the hook.
I would come back and say it's making sure you've got the support structure for the teams. I mean, we talked on the prep call. This collaboration is not new. I mean, I was a 4-year news director with Nexstar before my now 12 years at corporate. And we were collaborating amongst 28 stations that we were when I was the news director at the time. So the problem is when you get into a big event, does that local station have enough support if they're going to be inundated with, this station needs this and we need to provide live shots over here. And so it's really taken us to build up, those processes and procedures. I mentioned the aggregated content team. Now when there's a breaking news situation, that aggregated content team producer is going to be in touch with the newsroom so that they can keep the other 109, 110 newsrooms informed without, and we've all been there, right, on the assignment desk with somebody saying, could you do a live shot for my 4 p.m. newscast in Hawaii? No, we can't do that because we got to go through the process and they have to own it locally. So I think that was something that we've learned through that process. I'd also say as just an opportunity is, understanding our staff. We've got great staff out there. And maybe I'm now talking beyond breaking news here. Sometimes I think we've got the problem in this industry of we're trying to fit into specific models. And I like what Scott said, like newsroom of the future there. Some of that could be the uniqueness that the journalists bring to the table. And I think that's what makes every operation unique. What skill sets do they have? What connections do they have? What opportunities do they have to go tell a great data story or, to go tell a story that maybe it doesn't have anything to do with crime in a specific market, but has something to do with great context and perspective. And recognizing that, I think, has been a missed opportunity in some markets. And I think you're seeing that with some people that are deciding to leave our industry and go do something else, and maybe doing it on their own on a digital platform or something along those lines.
Yeah, I would say Avid's definitely had some, products that didn't go over great in the market over the years. But what I've noticed recently is sort of within the company is an attitude of fail fast, right? If you're gonna fail at something, you know what I mean? That's okay. But fail fast and then react and respond and basically readjust. And that's I'd say a more recent attitude. Part of that is just because of the pressures we're all feeling up here, right? To deliver content and do its efficiency quickly, all those things, right? And so that's where, we also feel pressure as vendors to try and meet those demands. And like I said, oftentimes what you first put out there isn't necessarily, the right fit. And part of that may be because we're all moving so quickly, right? And we're trying to respond to, ever-changing landscapes as it relates to technology. So it's like, okay, how do we quickly build into the processes ourselves a way in which we can do just that, respond very quickly. Cloud, IP, all these things sort of, in a way, fit very nicely, right, with that type of workflow, right, which is, you can respond, you can adjust, you can stand things up. If they don't work, fine. You take the things that were good, you throw out the bad, and you quickly come back with something that is a better fit. And I would say that's a newer way in which Avid, works.
Are you failing faster now than you did a year or two ago?
We are. We're way, yeah. No.
Very short failure turnaround times.
Yeah.
And do you know what? I said at the top in the first question that it's such a radical kind of overhaul of the whole structure of the company. Surely there's some tears and maybe some blood that have been spilled in this process. And I'm sure it's not without its pain over there.
Sure. I was thinking about what Scott said. I think there's a lot of truth to that too. I would say that, it's change management, right? And change of this magnitude is hard for anybody. I've been really blown away and impressed by the employees' ability to understand the why. Like they grasp that, especially when you connect it to how their viewing habits have changed over the last 10 years. And then, so that's not been an issue. The issue, I think, has been more about connecting the why to what they do specifically and how it changes what their job looks like and their responsibilities. And then going back to what Scott said, you make that change and then you can't just move on to the next station. You got to go back to that station and help because as they advance, they're going to run into new speed bumps and things that they've got to learn. And so then listening and adjusting and changing your game plan for that station based on where they are and what they need to learn, I think we found that to be really impactful.
We've only got like a minute, I think. And so I just want to ask one more thing for sure here. In terms of incentivizing or encouraging local reporters, to be involved in this and to be on site. I mean, you talked about the human component of this as maybe the most important, the training elements, et cetera. It's sort of obvious that now they get a national platform for their work, where before it might have just been Peoria and now it's the country. So there's an incentive in that, but if anybody just wants to speak to like how you get everybody on side with this way of working.
Yeah, I can speak to it from Live Now's side because we're unique in that we don't have a show structure, right? It's literally anything could change in a moment and we have to take it and go. And because of that, it means we also don't have time limits. And yes, the reporters want to come on and they want to see that there's an eye on the screen that they can see how many people are literally watching at that moment. They want to be in front of those people and they want to be seen, but they also want to tell their stories. And if you tell them all that work you've done all day or all week is going to be crushed into a minute 30 tough, or you tell them, look, you can talk to us about it and then really help us understand it. And then you've got 2 minutes. 5 minutes. If it's really compelling, maybe you've got 10, 15 because it's amazing, whatever the story is of importance, that actually has given them a huge amount of value. When they see that, they suddenly want to be there because they're like, I just did all this. I want to tell
you leave so much stuff on the floor.
Exactly. And that's what we can provide.
Pick it up off the floor and use it.
Yeah, they're proud of their work. Right. And I think the more they can share that work broadly, the more excited they're going to be.
Okay. All right. Well, on that note, thank you all so much. I really appreciate all your insights here. This is a fascinating topic. We're going to keep coming back to it. We have a panel in our next event in December in New York on this very subject. Now, first, please thank my lovely panelists here.